one section that I think is particularly relevant to us here in the Commonwealth at this particular time. And this is in the chapter entitled The A-Team, Abolish ICE, Antifa, and Sanctuary Anarchists. We had some, maybe we'll have some close encounters tomorrow, I hope not. No. So this is a section on the government sponsors of sanctuary anarchy. Not all open border subversives hide behind black bandanas and throw Molotov cocktails. Sometimes they wear three-piece suits or silk dresses. Sometimes they wear badges or black robes. Sometimes the worst enemies of law and order are the very people subsidized by taxpayers to uphold law and order. They are local police chiefs, county executives, district attorneys, mayors, judges, governors, members of Congress, and federal officials whose words, actions, and inaction enable the abolish ICE, Antifa, and anarchists. Walls and border controls are not enough to save America from invasion. The government sponsors of sanctuary anarchy must be exposed, shamed, voted out of office, impeached, and prosecuted. And then Michelle goes on for several pages with a cast of characters that many of you will recognize the names. Federal Judge Indira Talwani, who attacked ICE agents in Massachusetts when they took an alien into custody who had received probation for visa fraud and dared to arrest her in a courtroom, a public place. District Attorney Rachel Rollins. You talk about Bempumini Tahara, whose trial started this week, the man who avoided deportation after admitting to robbing 2 banks, sentence bargained down to 7 months, served a 364-day sentence, conveniently, released after release. He's now been arrested and charged and is being tried this week in the gruesome double murder of 2 Boston doctors. Marion Ryan's name comes up, and Judge, or should we say suspended Judge?
Yes, Judge Joseph. Yes.
And lock her up. And our favorite Newton City Council figures in here too. So, a week from Monday, there's going to be a hearing at the State House here for the perennial state sanctuary bill to be heard, which would make the Commonwealth of Massachusetts even more of a sanctuary. And I would encourage people to make your voices heard, contact your lawmakers, and so on. It's important that people have the facts about sanctuaries. How did we end up with the sanctuary movement, so many sanctuary jurisdictions, about 300 of them now, and what do you think is motivating it?
So there's a lot of special interests that have created this perfect storm that is trying to transform our sovereign nation into a sanctuary nation. And obviously many people will be familiar with the late 60s and 1970s when a lot of left-wing evangelical Christians essentially brazenly, openly called for their churches to defy federal laws and welcome into their parishes and dioceses and churches people who were evading deportation. And that really flourished in the Southwest. And many of those institutions, which were allied with the social justice wing of liberalism, have remained there. And they have agitated for amnesties from 1986 until the present, and used the pulpit to preach this warped version of scripture of welcoming the stranger and putting their political agenda above the national interest. Then you've got the entire legal community. And here, right, it's the ACLU that is essentially, you can't even say ghostwriting because they're openly writing the amendments to the sanctuary, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Right, the sanctuary laws. So basically every law school in the country has these pro bono clinics that are populated by all of these students who are being sent down to the border, and they work in conjunction with these left-wing religious organizations. And then you've got an entire subsidized structure of candidates that are running, many of them directly or indirectly subsidized by, for example, George Soros money. You gotta give the guy credit. They have their agenda, they're sticking to it, and they're very disciplined. And this is why we have Rachel Rollins and Marian Ryan and now Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. Literally a red diaper baby of convicted domestic terrorists from the Weather Underground who do what? I mean, these people in the 60s and 70s were targeting police. They were assassinating them, they were killing them, and they're celebrated by Hollywood. Robert Redford made a movie about Chesa Boudin's parents. And Chesa Boudin, any Cajun people here? Because Boudin is, I'm thinking it's the food. Anyway, right? Anyway, immigration is his main platform. It's to turn San Francisco into an even more radical sanctuary than it already is, just like what's happening here in Montgomery County. There are obviously electoral benefits and I guess collection plate and pew benefits that come from these sanctuary policies. And political benefits as well. And I think that's the most dire and alarming, from this perspective of Republicans who are preaching America first while they're allowing this to happen in their backyards. And yeah, that's how we got to where we are.
And, we don't want to end up like Montgomery County or the state of California or the state of Illinois. The public safety and the human costs are just too great.
Yes.
And I think that's what lawmakers need to hear.
And I would say about sanctuaries as well, the reason that I've held these Stand With ICE rallies and the reason that I've targeted all of these sanctuary cities on my tour is I escaped Montgomery County, Maryland. That's where my kids were born. We could see it coming 12 years ago. MS-13 was just beginning to surface. We would go to a local mall that has now basically been taken over by the gangsters, the public schools there now, obviously everything that's happened over the summer that became national news. So I went from LA, sanctuary, Seattle, sanctuary, Montgomery County, Maryland, sanctuary. I go to Colorado thinking, okay, this would be a great place to raise my kids in the Colorado Springs, a home of focus on the family. And what's happening there now? We've got a governor who's trying to, well, he's playing both sides. But ultimately what they're trying to do is county by county, Californicate the whole entire country.
Well, last week there was a hearing on the Hill, not the one that all the news coverage is about.
Right, bread and circuses distraction.
Right. A real hearing on the Senate side about, it was an update on the border crisis, and they presented the latest statistics. 1.1 million apprehensions and people turned back at the legal port of entry, which was up 68% from last year. 978,000 people apprehended at the southwest border, up 88% over the prior year. 473,000 family unit members, a record. 76,000 unaccompanied minors, which was the highest number ever in a year. Massachusetts, according to some of the Border Patrol intelligence, Massachusetts is one of the most popular destinations that is listed when they are interviewed after apprehension. They are coming to East Boston, Lynn, I'm sorry, that's my phone, Milford. Another statistic that they put out that was alarming is that they've estimated there are 150,000 individuals that were not apprehended that got away. Drug seizures are up a lot. According to the Pew Research Center, Massachusetts has the fastest growing rate of new illegal arrivals settling here of any state in the entire union. One of the Homeland Security officials who testified said, we are just one court decision away from right back to the worst period of the border crisis. We've made some progress because of the Trump administration policy changes.
Right.
And they're going after the smugglers to a greater extent than has been the case before and having some success there. In the book, though, you talk a lot about some players in this border crisis that do not receive enough attention in the news media. Not the smugglers who are affiliated with the cartels who control the southern side, but the accomplices of the smugglers who are mostly NGOs and operating outside the, I would argue, just as far outside the laws as the other smugglers. Can you tell us a little bit about the groups that help enable this flow of illegal workers into our country?
Yeah, so the opening chapter of the book I called the Caravan Cartel, all aboard the Caravan Cartel. And it's not just about the formal drug cartels. And I talk about probably the most visible of the NGOs operating south of the border, became international news, Pueblos Sin Fronteras. And the head of Pueblos Sin Fronteras, or at least one of the declared heads, is a man named Irineo Mujica, who is a binational citizen of both Mexico and the United States, purportedly gained his U.S. citizenship as a result of that notorious 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act, so-called deal, which was a very one-sided deal. Remember that the reason that Reagan signed it was because it was supposed to be a one-time amnesty, blanket pardon. We're just going to do it once and then get our system in order, and we never got the enforcement part of it.
Right, the end of illegal immigration.
Right, yeah, of course, right. And then you read all of those statistics, and that tells you what we ended up with. And he claims in newspaper interviews that his family were agricultural workers. So they came in through SAW is how they got amnestized. And he immediately turned around and started working for not our country, but the one south of the border. And he's been holding these caravans that, again, really just escalated under the Trump administration, but have been going on for years and years, pretty much like clockwork with every holiday, right? Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas. And I think it's the brazenness with which he was amassing people, basically thumbing his nose at both countries and bringing people across. And
really to test our
our will or our lack of will. And what I did was track all of the NGOs and religious organizations on both sides of the border that were enabling, basically acting like Sherpas for this illegal alien workforce, because that's what it is. It's for cheap labor workers. It's not for compassion. It's not because we care about families and giving them opportunity.
Or any sudden persecution or oppression of people.
Right.
That would qualify them for asylum.
Exactly.